just different location, I'm never going to make $4,900 rent. I may be lucky if I get $3,500. Who is the winner? The tenant, obviously, because the tenant lives in a $500,000 house for $3,500, right? Whereas equivalent, the rent should be $5,000.
Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting show, the About That Water podcast, where we help the sandwich generation build strong financial habits so that they can spend money, talk about money, and enjoy their money with confidence. So one of the people that I want to talk about today is a German-born former Air Force pilot who soared for 22 years in the military service, where he mastered the diamond formation leadership and honed a disciplined analytical approach to problem solving. After a distinguished military career and a demanding executive role for what he made a pivotal shift into real estate investing, driven by the desire of the time, freedom, and economic independence so that he wouldn't have to work forever. And I'm sure you don't want to work forever either. So his early disappointing and expensive ventures had taught him the critical importance of learning about the first before I'm doing it, leading him to develop his robust due diligence methods that he champions today. Now, as the CEO of the Ideal Wealth Grower, he's really dedicated his mission to help 1,000 people reach economic independence through the residential real estate investing by 2030. And I cannot hold him up any further because he has so much great information to share with you all. Welcome to the show, Dr. Axel.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So why real estate?
Well, one of the things that has to do with why real estate is I started to build my own business in 2005. And if you go a little bit back in history, you would find that 2002, 2003 was the real big stock market crash, or .com crash, as a lot of people call it. And for me, when I started my own business and I started realizing, okay, so there will be no more military pension, 401k plan, any of that kind of stuff. What can I do on my own to build a portfolio that allows me at some point, to pick the time when I want to retire and become financially independent? And so I only really had experience to some extent, not much, but some, in stock market investing, and then obviously savings account, that normal stuff. But that had kind of burned a little bit with the whole crash. So I'm like, okay, what else could I do? And immediately following that was the question, okay, what do other people that I would look up to actually do with their money if they don't do the stock market? And one of the things, and you will probably chuckle about that, at the time, Terminator movies were like huge, right? Yep. So one of the people that I always kind of related to, you have to keep in mind, I came from Germany, I was in the US Air Force, then I was living in California, working for the software company, and then started my own business. So it's basically an immigration story, even if it didn't start that way. And Arnold was, in a way, similar, right? It's also an immigration story that didn't really start that way. So I don't know exactly why, and I know this is sounding like there were any kind of relationship. It was more like, okay, this guy is in the news, in the media, everywhere, makes tons of money. I wonder what he's doing with his money, right? And so I dug into that a little bit, just what I could find. And there were several articles at the time that said Arnold had been building one of the largest privately owned residential real estate portfolios in California. I'm like, really? I thought he's an actor, right? And a bodybuilder and stuff. And that kind of triggered me to say, okay, well, let me look around. We were living in the Santa Barbara area, and I'm like, okay, I guess you have to be a multi-million-dollar making movie star to invest in California, because none of the numbers made any sense to me. But like you said in your intro, as a German guy, a military guy, I used to approach everything very logically with spreadsheets and formulas. And so I thought, well, okay, but he does real estate. Can you do real estate for normal people? And that's what got the whole thing started, basically. That's basically my answer to real estate. I'm not saying it was Arnold, It was just the fact that it got me to look at what is he doing with his money. And, I found out, and then I started basically researching and learning.
Yes. So, now that you have done this research and going through that process, what was it that, what was the failing point inside the real estate market that was like, you know what, am I really doing this the right way, or should I give up?
Well, I wouldn't say give up, but what I had known, I had been told, I'm sure pretty much anybody who ever really even heard about or considered about real estate, was two things or three things. One was real estate is all, as far as success in real estate, is all location, location, location. And supposedly not only when you're looking for your own residence, but even as an investor, it's all location. So I'm like, okay, I'm in the most beautiful, amazing locations that you could be, being Santa Barbara. Okay, I have a great location, but when I run the numbers, it doesn't work. So that was the first, okay. Then the other thing that basically triggered for me was, well, let me say the second one first. The second one was, I had always heard that if you are an owner of real estate, that you have to clean toilets and fix faucets and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Right? So it needed to be in the right location, and you needed to be a handyman. Mm-hmm. So I felt I was in the right location, but I couldn't make the numbers work. And even though I can fix a little bit of stuff, but I'm definitely not a handyman. So what I then actually found by doing the research, getting books and stuff like that, is what do you really want to see as an investor is really that you generate income from your investment. And in a way, I mean, I knew this from the stock market, right? I mean, if you invest in stocks, the income is basically the stock rising, you at some point selling all or some of it, and you're making the profit between what you put in and what you got out. Well, in real estate, if you put money in and you rent the place and it makes rent income, that's a form of income. Now, it can also increase in value, so that's potentially another form of income if you were to ever sell the property. But the fundamental premise is you want to make income. So what I learned from that was, okay, if I want to make income, is it really the location close enough to me where I can be the handyman? Is that really the concept? And it became very obvious to me that there's a huge difference between your own residence and investing in properties that you then rent out. Because obviously, if you can find a property in a good location and you're kind of handy and don't need to get a plumber, electrician, and so forth for everything, yeah, you can live nicely if you can afford it. And we did. I mean, we had a house in Santa Barbara and we were living nicely. And if there were minor things to fix, I fixed them, right? And mowed the lawn myself and all that stuff. But from an investing perspective, I learned, and this is really the true short answer to your question, what really counts is the performance of the investment. So you want to find an investment opportunity that when you run the numbers, it has a high likelihood, close to 100%, that it will perform. And everything else comes after.
Okay, so if somebody thinking about getting into real estate, is there like a paper napkin type of way to kind of make sure that this works on for the numbers?
Yeah, well, what I use is what's called the 1% rule. So now, obviously, there's a whole long list of things that kind of also apply when you're looking for your own residence, right? If you were to say, okay, I'm planning, because of my job or whatever the circumstances, I'm planning to move to Cincinnati, Ohio, or I'm planning to move to Nashville, Tennessee, or any place like that, you would also start looking at where do I want to live, right? But from an investor perspective, same scenario, but you don't want to move there, you want to invest there. The very quick back of the napkin, so to speak, calculation is to say, how much is the price to buy the property that I'm kind of looking at? And what is the rent that the seller, or there are online tools like Rentometer, Deal Check, Bigger Pockets. They have basically little plugins that you can go on the internet, type in the address, and it tells you what is to be expected for rent. So that ratio between how much you pay and how much the rent is, if you can get that to be 1% or close to 1%, there are a few variations we can talk about. But if you get it to 1% or close to it, that is basically assuring you that you're going to have cash flow. And here's an important little add-on. That always used to work beautifully, and you really had like quite a bit of cash flow. But what's kind of interesting in our age time right now, you know, your listeners, everybody knows, we live in a time of relatively high interest rates.
Yeah.
And the 1% rule works even with 7 and 8% interest. So if you have a property that, let's say, costs $180,000 in Cincinnati, Ohio, or somewhere in the Nashville area, and you can get $1,800 rent, you can run the numbers through all those calculators I mentioned, and you will see there will be some cash flow. Now, is it $500 a month? Probably not, especially if you have high interest. But if you go through everything, you still should have like a few dollars, maybe 50, maybe 100, 150, depending, you know, what the costs are. But that's basically the first thing to say. If I have 5, 10 different properties that I looked at and I like them and that I can afford one, and this is basically what we do in our mentoring program, right? We teach people how to actually find properties, why to find them in certain areas, and then we teach them how to do those calculations. But the quick thing, 180K property, 1750 rent, okay, now it's worth looking deeper.
Okay, so that's the quick and dirty is to make sure.
That's the quickest way to go about it. And there are many, many variations, right? Like that's basically, if you ask me, you know, what makes the bloom of a flower beautiful, you know, you can maybe say, yeah, the first thing you want to see is a really nice color. But then when you go up, you know, there are 27 levels deeper behind.
Right. So because a lot of people are afraid to even get into real estate. Yes, we know we need to get to it just to live. So how do we actually come up with I guess you could say like the seed money to start that investment?
Well, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. The first thing, and I know this is maybe taking a few extra minutes, but it's really a matter of how have you been raised? It's the number one thing. And I know that people, myself included, I'm assuming you as well, we cannot really influence how we're being raised. But why I'm starting with that as the first thing is if your parents understood to instill a certain level of frugality in you, a certain like giving you a better start into life by saying something like, okay, as soon as you start making any money, put 10% away or 20%, but something, put it away before you start spending any of the rest. That helps you the most, because one thing that people oftentimes don't realize unless we're talking about it like you and I are doing right now, and then you go back and remember, the younger you are, the lower the amount of money is that you really need to spend. But if you really go back to like high school times, any money that you spent was basically for almost everybody just for pleasure. Right? You didn't have to pay for food. Right. You didn't have to pay for rent. You didn't typically have to pay for transportation. You know, all the things that we nowadays pay, you had to pay maybe a little for the girlfriend, you know, so, but, you know, still within. So if you let's say you had like a paper route or some kind of job somewhere. I had a job in a nursery when I was 14. I really just blew the money, right? Later, my parents started to make it clear that it would be good to save some because there will be things that I would want in the future and it would be good to have money. But initially, the first 6 months in the job, I was like, oh, I have money. I can buy this stuff. I don't have to ask my parents anymore, right? So that's why I'm saying that the sooner you get that instilled in you and you put something away, and let's just say you start at 16. By the time you're finished with school and college and everything, you're 25. If you really consistently did that for basically 10 years, you probably have enough money to buy your first house. Right now, that's one option. Now, let's say that didn't happen, not your fault. You can't really pick your parents, right? So,
that's true, yeah.
The second thing is to basically start asking yourself which habits are helping and have helped for generations to make successful people successful, especially when you're thinking about money. And one thing that I like to point to is a little book called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yes.
Right. And what that basically says is the same thing like I just described, is for any money that comes in, at the moment that it comes in, put 10% away. Now you can put more away, but if you really do this, think about it. Let's say you have a job that makes $3,000 a month, right? Now, in the beginning, when you're younger, putting 10% or $300 away is probably easy. You could probably even do $500. But if you think about that for a year, that's $3,000 to $5,000 a year. You do this for 3 or 4 years, you have enough for a down payment for a house, right? And that's assuming your income doesn't increase. That's assuming that you're not getting a raise, that you never put anything else away, which is kind of unrealistic but conservative, right? So that's one way, or the second way to think about it. The other way that I find interesting is not to only look at everything that happens in life on your own, but think about how do most organizations actually become successful. Yes, they have a founder, but the success comes as they grow. So one idea that I find beautiful, and I don't know how many people in like college age, university age you have, but just for a moment, imagine you're getting ready to go to college and you know that you're most likely going to be there anywhere between, that's at least the plan, 4 to 6 years, depending on how far you want to take it. And you need to stay somewhere, right? So what's the most beautiful concept is to find a few people that go to college with you and decide that you're going to buy something like a fourplex, right? The beauty of that is those 4 parents, you and the other 3 people's parents, all can vouch for you on the down payment of that place. Right now, you can decide if it's a fourplex, if the 4 people each have 1 unit, or if you maybe say, okay, we share, 2 people share a unit, the other 2 people share a unit, and then the remaining 2 units are being rented. If you do that, you probably live for free, right? Because in most cases, especially in any kind of college town or stuff like that, the income that you would make for either 2 or 4 people living in those 2 units that you don't use would be enough to pay for everything that are the costs of that fourplex. But here comes the thing. Now, if you do this, you're building a foundation for everyone, not just yourself, but the other 3 people as well. Because sooner or later, your college time will be done. You will have paid down a little bit for the first 4 years without having spent your own money, which, by the way, I would highly recommend to put aside so that you have a down payment for your next investment property, right? But regardless, you now have 1 property owned by these 4 people. If you were my mentoring clients, we would create a little LLC partnership, 4 people owning that fourplex. That thing is going to be there forever and ever and ever. And it's going to make you income from 4 units when you're done with your college time, right? And then if you say, okay, a fourplex costs, let's say, $1,500 or $2,000 a month in cost and brings in another $2,000, right? Then you can either split it or not, or however you want to do it, but you have a starting point. And interestingly enough, you also now own something. You own the business that owns the property, and the property has probably, depending on when you started, gained value. Now, if you were lucky enough, for example, and you started in let's say 2019 or 2018, and then you finished in 2021 from home because you couldn't go to college. Now COVID is over, 2022, you're basically done. The place is there, is rented out, right? So you're good to go. You got super low interest in the mortgage, and you're really making good income. And the starting point for anybody to say, hey, I have a property there that we bought, let's say for $250,000, $300,000. Now it's worth $500,000. So you have $200,000 of equity sitting in it that you could use as a down payment. If every single one of the original owners were to do this, you can buy a $200,000 investment property. So that's your second property on your own, right? So you have 4 people now, you continuing from there on your own. And, now, since you are so smart and you did your college really well and you got recruited into a good job, and you probably have not started family yet, you can probably keep putting 20% aside. So you can see it's really a matter of where is my starting point? Is my starting point when I started my first little job, me in a nursery, people having paper routes, working at McDonald's or whatever? Is it when you get into college? Is it when you have your first job, or is it sometime later? The only difference is, and that's really the answer to the question, is how can I get my hands or save to have somewhere around nowadays $30,000 to $40,000 to start with.
Yeah,
that's basically. I used to say 20, but prices and everything has gone up so much that you really need to think about 30 to 40,000. And fundamentally, to kind of put a little wrapper on it, the sooner you start, the earlier you can become an investor. And I would really try to appeal to your audience, anybody who is a parent. I really meant that very, very seriously. One of your responsibilities besides providing food and shelter and security is to teach them and help them to have the best possible start into life. And one of the things that I'm sure almost everybody will acknowledge, if you can start with an inflation-protected asset as early as possible in your life, you have basically started on a successful journey through life. I'm absolutely 100% sure about that. And it only gets better from there. So, if you're a parent, please, start developing the habit and then teach those habits to your kids so that for them it's completely natural.
So with that particular understanding of, okay, now we got the seed money and stuff like that, where did you learn this from? What type of, I guess you could say, money lesson did your parents have on you when you're growing up?
Well, my parents basically didn't teach me anything about investing.
Oh.
But what they did teach me is, and this is almost like a German thing, I am sometimes wondering if it's part of the DNA, but what they did teach me is to make sure that when you go for any deal, and I explain in a second what I mean by deal, that you really get the best value for your money. Now, what does that mean for a German, right? I don't know, where are you located?
Oh, I'm located in Maryland.
Maryland. Okay, Maryland has Aldi's, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the audience may know Aldi's. It's kind of like a discount store, right? But it's very specific. So in Germany, they have Aldi. Then they have Lidl is another one of those
Lidl's
chains.
over here as well. Yep.
They have Netto, and they have one called Penny. Penny is a little bit like the dollar store. Okay. So they have those four. And what happens to a normal German family, at least once a week, each one of those four stores is sending a little flyer to say what are their advertisements, right? And what you see is they're competing with each other to get people into their stores. So they're picking something that most people need and discount the price to what they pay. They make no profit on it, right? So what happens, and this is the explanation what I mean by getting the proper value for your money. You might get one from Netto and you look at it and say, oh, this week they're having coffee on advertisement. So the regular coffee in all the other three stores, let's say, is $7 a pound, but they sell it for $4.50. Now here comes the DNA thing. The Germans would say, okay, let me make a little list. I need coffee from Penny and butter from Penny. I need milk from Aldi. I need oranges from Aldi. And so on. You make a list, and then you go from one to the next and only buy the stuff that's on sale. If you do that, if that's your habit, not only are you getting the same quality, that because they all buy the same stuff from the same brands, by the way, it's no difference, right? It's literally brand name coffee, brand name butter and stuff. It's just to get people in the store. But if you build that, and this is what my parents did without really talking about it, my mom always looked at the things circled, and you might say, okay, well, that was maybe your mom. Okay. I went to Air Force Academy, and they made me and all of us, they claimed that guys that wanted to be officers like Top Gun, even though that's, Navy and we were Air Force, but if you wanted to do that, you needed to know how to ballroom dance, right? So we were put in an Air Force bus, driven to a dance academy downtown Munich to go and learn ballroom dancing. I was from northern Germany. We actually have a genetic difference. We have basically swallowed a stick. That's about how stiff I was going there, right? So, but there were lots of really pretty young women who were into ballroom dancing. And when they were volunteering to help these stiff Air Force guys, they got basically training for free. Right. And I got to meet my wife there.
Awesome.
Why am I telling you this? When we got closer together and we started basically living together and stuff, you know what she did?
What'd she do?
I never said a peep about it. Netto, Lidl, Aldi, Penny came in, sat down, circled it, and then said, let's go shopping.
Wow.
That's why I'm saying,
that's how you knew she was the one?
So is it really DNA, right? So, so in the context to your question, that actually means you want to figure out, and this is what I meant by the difference between everybody saying location, location, location versus performance, performance, performance. If I give your audience a quick example, and you have probably in your mind seen or thought about this before. If you live in a relatively expensive area like I lived in Santa Barbara, a normal modest house when we were living there was about $500,000. And you got a regular 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a little small garden around it. And there wasn't downtown to Santa Barbara. They were like 20 miles out or something, right?
Yeah.
And through my work, I got to go places. I went to Alabama, I went to Ohio, I went to different places to do work. But when work was over in the afternoon and you went basically to a restaurant or just driving through the town with your rental car, you saw houses there and they didn't look much different. But every so often you saw a sign that said 85,000, 92,000. I'm like, wow, that same house, if I had it in my location, it would be 400 or 500,000. So I'm sure we have all seen that, but that's an illustration of what I mean by performance. So if you buy that $500,000 house in Santa Barbara, and today it would be probably $1 million house, but let's just stick with 500.
Yeah.
To apply our little napkin math would mean you have to get $5,000 rent or close to it to make the 1% rule. And on the other hand, the $92,000 house, same house basically, just in a different location, needs to make only $920 rent. Now, what is more likely? In my mentoring, I always say, who is the winner? If you look at it like a game.
I see.
In a $92,000 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, paying $920 rent, I'm as the owner the winner, because even out of those $920 rent, I'm probably making $150 cash. On the $500,000 house, same house, just different location, I'm never going to make $4,900 rent. I may be lucky if I get $3,500. Who is the winner? The tenant, obviously. Because the tenant lives in a $500,000 house for $3,500, right? Whereas equivalent, the rent should be $5,000. So the answer to your question is, where do you look and how do you look and how do you find good properties? Is you have to find first areas in the country where that ratio of price to rent is still healthy. And it obviously is not in San Francisco or Miami or New York or all these big places or even Chicago. So from an investment perspective, you have to ask yourself, where is a healthy population that has normal jobs, that likes to live in a house with their family and can afford the rent? And there's a great book for anybody who is kind of interested to just find out, well, so what are all the things that I need to know to make that determination? Chris Closure, I think it was about 2006 or so, he wrote a book that's called Turnkey Revolution. And that's basically what helped me a lot, because yes, it describes in the first half of the book how his family built basically a turnkey business in Memphis, Tennessee. But the second half of the book is almost like pages after pages of checklists. So if you don't want to, become a mentoring client of mine or work with somebody, you want to do it all on your own, I would get that book and then read these checklists and say, okay, where can I find properties where the vast majority of what the checklist asks for is met? And it includes things like what's the ratio between price and rent. But it's also asked the question, okay, what are the people that live in the area and what kind of jobs do they have? Right? Like if you want to buy a property where theoretically the ratio is good, but nobody can afford to live in a house and they all live in apartments, that doesn't work either.
Right.
Right. So those are some of those criteria. But the first thing I would say is become aware that you're really looking for performance. And nowadays with AI, you can just go on ChatGPT or Grok or Anthropic or whatever one you use, and you just go in and say, okay, find me locations in the United States where the average ratio of rent and the average ratio of sales price is close to 1%. And it's going to tell you which locations those are.
You know, I never thought to use AI for that. Like I've used it for everything else, but never thought to.
But for me, what I'm finding is you could Google it, but two things happen. Number one, Google first gives you almost all of the first page advertisements.
Of course.
And then the thing is, you never know. This is for me actually the lesson I've learned with AI. With Google, I would still say after using it pretty much as long as it exists, I have never really learned, and nobody has ever really taught me how to write a proper prompt for Google. And I don't know exactly why, but I feel with the AI, with the large language model stuff that we have now, it is somehow way more obvious. But if I say, find me affordable properties in the United States, and it gives me whatever answer, I can quickly see, no, that's not quite it. Let me define what I mean by affordable, and the second or latest, the third time, it's pretty much spot on. Right. And Google doesn't do that, right? Like you don't really have the kind of feedback. That's why I use AI basically like my new search engine. Also, I'm a little weird. Mine is called Roberto, because I feel like it's like almost like a person I can see.
Right. But it's really cool to see the way how you utilize AI. Because I had a person on as an instructor at New York University on talking about AI, and she was focusing on the non-biased side of the house of AI. But it's good to see that you use it more so as a search, more so to get down to what you actually want versus, like he said with Google, it's a one-shot done and deal. It can't go back like, hey, I really meant this. Or can you dive into this based on the answers that you already have? Let's compile that a little further down. That's really cool. You do it that way.
But there's one other thing, and this is relatively recent, and it will become much, much more prevalent. And I only know about it because I'm a little nerdy from my Air Force time, right? So AI, the most common AI tools in use right now allow you to ask the AI, like Chat or Grok or so forth, when you do what some of them call deep think or some of them call it reasoning, is basically an option where it shows you put in your prompt, right? Like find me the locations with the best ratio of price to rent in the United States, starting with above 1% to no lower than 0.8%. And then you say deep think or you say reasoning, and it literally shows you what it goes through step by step, what it does, what it thinks, what it looks at, and then throws away and looks at something else and so forth. And that's another thing that you can never do. And by just watching it, I've done it a few times. I'm not doing it every time, but every once in a while, I'm kind of curious, okay, how does it get to its results? Or I say his results because Roberto, right? So how does he get to his results? And when I'm looking at it, I can see by just watching, okay, he's kind of doing what I would do if I had to open all these different links that Google presents to me. It's just at a mind-boggling speed. Like it goes in, it looks at it, it blinks off. You see a little boom, it's gone, and the next one, right? And so then it basically starts putting things together, and every once in a while, it seems to think, oh, that doesn't quite fit, and it throws it away. But you can watch it doing that, and the whole thing only takes like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But the point, what I'm saying, why is that so different is, by doing that exercise of watching it reasoning for a little while, it really helps you understand how you need to do better prompts. Right? Because now, after, let's say you watch that 5 times. Now you know, okay, that's what it does when I'm asking it this way. Next time you ask a little different, you have obviously different questions, but you start understanding how you can improve your question so that it's more likely to find the stuff that you're looking for. So that's a little excursion into the AI stuff, but that's, I don't know, 2 years ago, I would have said, Google it.
Right.
But there's a better mousetrap now,
Yeah, I'm thinking about it also for like interviews, because that's one of the things that helped me get better at asking better questions.
Right.
And, sometimes I do hesitate on my questioning because it's like, I do need to rethink it because it's too vague, or I'm along the lines, but I just don't know how to ask that particular question. Even because like you and I, we having this discussion. It's just,
but there's a neat little trick. A friend of mine, I wasn't smart enough to come up with it myself, but a friend of mine said that to me. He knows that I do a lot of coaching and mentoring, so it's kind of obvious. The real strength of mentoring is to get really good at asking questions.
Yeah.
And so he said, if you're not sure about your question, why don't you ask AI what a good question would be?
That's a good one.
Literally, right? Like if you say, okay, I want to ask somebody on what's the best way to paint this wall. And you go and say, AI, tell me what's the best way if I'm looking really not just for paint the wall, but for these different things. The wall is really rough and it is the stucco is falling apart, and like you can describe it a little bit. And it comes up with 5 different ways, 10 different ways of asking the question. And then you pick the one that resonates most with you, and then you say, okay, pretend to be the friend. Here's the question. So, right. So I mean, it's in my opinion, we are just barely scratching a tiny little bit of the surface. This thing is going to be so much more in our lives in the future. But yeah, I think, from if you start and you want to do everything on your own, you don't want to mentor, you don't want to sign up for a program or stuff like that, having this kind of a tool set available to you is enormous, right? Like, so I would still say use Turnkey Revolution by Chris Closure as a starting point just to get into it, because he's really describing very well what is turnkey investing. And that was my starting point to get back to one of your questions. Is I'm sitting on the west end of the country in Santa Barbara, no way to ever invest in anything, can barely afford my house. How can I be a real estate investor?
Right.
And the real first answer is, well, that only works when you invest in turnkey investing. Okay. And if you like, we can dive a little deeper into that for people to understand what is that.
Yeah, explain that a little bit deeper for the people who haven't heard it before.
Okay. I'm again going to start at a point where your audience is going to say, this guy is getting a little weird. So my starting point for becoming an investor for well-performing properties in residential real estate is, number one, to say, in my mind, with my mindset, I need to separate my private life and my investing. Investing is kind of like a job. And I don't mean in the amount of time spent, but in what it is. So what we do when somebody joins our program, the first thing we do is to say, okay, let's start a business, an LLC. And what would, if you had to come up with a name, what would you call it?
Weaver Real Estate.
Say that again.
Weaver Real Estate.
Weaver Real Estate. Okay. Yeah. So I would say, okay, let's call it King Weaver Real Estate.
Okay. Right? King on there. Okay.
King Weaver Real Estate LLC. That's what we're building. And then we basically get a bank account. We set up the company in Wyoming. We're good to go. King Weaver Real Estate exists now. That's the first step. And then we're basically going to say, okay, what is turnkey investing? Is basically finding, not really in the traditional sense, but in some sense, people that want to work for King Weaver Real Estate. So who are those people that we need to find? We need to find somebody who is finding properties and make them really nice and renovate them. That's one employee or group of employees we need. We
Yeah, we
not
need those.
need somebody who is willing to give us the 80% of the money that we need together with our 20% to invest into the property. So
Right.
that's a lender, a bank, or so forth. Yes, they're not really in the normal sense employees, but we are employing them as King Weaver Real Estate LLC to work for us, to give us money, work for us, manage the mortgage, right? In a way.
Yep.
It's actually, people forget, when you get a mortgage, regardless whether it's for your residence or for an investment property, when you get the paperwork, it actually is called a mortgage servicer. That's who you pay your money to every month, to a mortgage servicer. But how much closer is that to calling it, they're servicing my mortgage?
Very close.
And
Yeah.
who has the mortgage? King Weaver LLC. Right? So, okay, so you need lender, you need somebody to renovate the property. Obviously, it's like 1,000 miles away. You need somebody to manage it and to find you the tenants and to collect the rent. Right now, obviously, the King Weaver Real Estate LLC also has a bank account, so they can send the money there. Right? Then you might probably say, okay, if you work with me, I would say, well, let's decide to build a cluster, not have one here, one here, one here, one there. We want to start somewhere, whether we used AI or not, to figure out where do we want to build our first cluster. Let's just stick with the example. We built our first cluster in Cincinnati. Right? Cluster means 4, 5, 6 properties kind of close together.
Okay.
And why close together? Well, because then you can use one property manager and they take care of all the properties. What's the benefit to King Weaver is you only have to have one call a month for 5 properties, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to tell this employee what's been happening with your properties last month, right? Tenants and repairs and rent collected, blah, blah, blah. So your job as the CEO or king of King Weaver Real Estate LLC is to talk to these guys once a month, right? So we have that, and then there are a couple other things. If you build a cluster, you would also hire an inspection company. So yes, obviously for the first property, and then when you keep adding more to the cluster, that's the same ones that you send out there to inspect the properties. So that's basically what I mean by you're building organizations, companies, and people who work for King Weaver Real Estate LLC. And the reason why I call it King Weaver Real Estate LLC is because it has to do with your mindset. If you don't like the word king, you can say founder, or you can say CEO or president, whatever title you want to give yourself. But from a mindset, it's your company, it's your property. These people are working for you, and they get paid for it. They get paid the mortgage, they get paid insurance, if insurance is another one of those employees, right?
Yeah,
they get paid for managing it and stuff, which also, by the way, means what do you do if in your team or in your company, if you're having a normal job, somebody doesn't perform? What happens?
You got to fire them.
Right. So if you're the king of King Weaver Real Estate LLC, the king can fire people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're obviously not just checking in, for example, with property management to see what happened, but each time you check in with them, you also evaluate their performance. Right. And so that's, by the way, some people forget this is also true with mortgage. Right. Like, let's say right now you bought the property last month and you have to pay 7% mortgage. And let's say Trump convinces Jerome Powell that finally to lower interest rates, and next year it's down to 5%. Well, what do? The king is going to call the mortgage company and say, okay, I see everywhere I can get mortgages for 5%. I'm paying you 7%. Make me an offer. They say, oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Weaver, we can't. Okay, thank you. I find somebody.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a mindset thing. It's you are, and I use the term in our mentoring, you are the creator of your own future, and it starts in your mind, in your head. If you want a different future where you may not have to work because you have financial independence, your property portfolio pays you money every month enough to live off, well, you got to be the boss. You are the person in charge. Yeah. And if you find good people from the get-go, they might be with you for 20 or 30 years or forever. But most of the time, I can say this for my own portfolio, yes, I was lucky maybe to pick a few good ones that I'm still with, but I also had to let some go. Right? That's just the way it is. And it's also a matter of there's a really interesting book, kind of a little bit on the side, called Good to Great. I don't know if you've ever heard that, Good to Great by Jim Collins.
I've heard of
And
it, but I haven't written
he
it down.
uses this analogy. If your business starts with you having a used vehicle, that's what you need to do your business. And the business starts growing, and you can change that used vehicle into a newer vehicle. And it keeps growing, and you can change it for a minibus because you need a minibus now, since you need an accountant and a marketing person and so forth. And then it keeps growing and be successful, and you need a little bit bigger bus, one of those 15-seaters. And then it keeps growing, and you basically, to stay within that analogy, you need a Greyhound bus. The person that you hired when you got a minibus might not be the right person for the Greyhound bus. That doesn't mean that they don't know their job, but they knew their job for a business that needed a minibus. They may not know how to do the job for a business that has a Greyhound bus. So that's another thing, but that's kind of the second thing. First, you want to have all good people, most likely. That's best. And as you grow, you kind of also want to check, okay, why does this apply? If somebody listens to us and says, okay, I'm not quite sure, how does that apply? Let's just say over time, over like a 10-year period, you bought 7 properties and got mortgages for each every time you bought one. Mm-hmm. So now your whole portfolio, let's say, is $1.5 million worth in assets. And out of that, you have maybe $1 million in mortgage, but you have 7 mortgages. The minibus was, each house got its own mortgage. The Greyhound bus is getting somebody who gives you one mortgage for everything. Called a portfolio loan or portfolio mortgage.
I like that. Okay. Right? I didn't know that you can do a portfolio loan like that, though.
Yeah, you can. The only point is, this is a little bit like, there's a little bit extra. Most of the time, those portfolio loans require 50% equity. Right. So if your portfolio is 1.5 million, but you still have $1 million in mortgages, it wouldn't quite work. But if you wait a year or two, and now your portfolio is 2 million and you have like 900,000, it works. And now you have 1 mortgage instead of 7.
Oh, that's nice. Right?
Okay. But that's cool. To illustrate a little bit, what does it mean, a minibus and a Greyhound bus? Well, in the minibus, you have 7 individual mortgages. In a Greyhound bus, you have now reached a size where companies are saying, okay, $900,000 mortgage to cover 7 properties, we're doing that. Right? So that's the growth of your business, but you, the king of King Weaver Real Estate LLC, have to grow with this. And it starts from day one to know, it's my business, I'm in charge. You may have a job where you have to dance for somebody else's tune, but in your thing, you're the king or the queen, and it's you're in charge, you're the boss, and you determine what you want to do, where you want to do it, and how you want to do it. Now, what I find, and that's why I'm kind of adamant about it, is a lot of people, especially when they have a good job and they want to now take some of the money to get into real estate investing, nobody ever taught them how to be the king or how to be the queen and how to really be the creator of your own future. And I find this is probably slightly more important in our mentoring that I do for people than finding the properties and applying everything and doing it right and making sure that we're actually growing from like the shitty little car to a nice car, minibus, Greyhound bus, right? That's the journey as you grow your portfolio. But that's almost like writing a software in a sense, right? If you put all the pieces and the software runs property, it's just rinse and repeat.
Right.
But the thing that happens for you as a person, what happens with your mindset, what happens with how you approach stuff, that's something that a lot of people never got taught anywhere. I had to learn it myself as well. And I'm very grateful to some of the people and some of the books I read. A lot about it has to do with leadership. That's where my degrees are in. Because that's really what, if you think about it, when we go back to the analogy of these employees that you have in the King Weaver Real Estate LLC, they're looking for guidance. I always ask people, in my audience, I'm happily asking your audience, when you look at your normal job, where you go to work, W-2, you're making your income, what do you really want from your manager, from your boss, from the founder or leader of the company? And what we want is guidance, we want direction, we want inspiration, we want motivation. We want to know why we're doing it and where it's going to go.
Right.
Yes, in the background, we also want security. We want to know that the guys up there at the top make the right decisions so the business can thrive. But on the day-to-day basis, we're looking for those fundamental things. Well, what you need to learn and want to learn and should want to learn is to be that person that provides the guidance. And by providing the guidance that creates your best future, you're growing into this role of the boss, the CEO, king, queen, whatever you want to call it.
So it brings up to, because I mentioned earlier in the intro, which is your diamond formation leadership. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? Because it kind of goes along the lines of where you're going.
Right. A little bit. Now, there are some things that people probably not necessarily aware of, but I always like to start out with anybody, and I highly recommend it just for having the experience. If you go to an air show and you see, like the Blue Angels or any one of those air show jet teams, one thing that you see is that they make different shapes with multiple airplanes, right? Like 4 planes or 6 planes or 8 planes, and they make diamonds or they make like triangles and stuff like that, flying really close to each other. So now, where does diamond formation leadership come? Is basically 4 planes shaped in a shape like a diamond. That's where the name comes from. But what does it really mean, and what does it mean in our context? How is it even possible to do this? And I use the analogy of, if you have like a big interstate highway kind of thing with like 3 lanes, imagine something with 3 lanes, and you have identified another car in the middle lane that you pretend to be the lead car, and you're driving in a position so that where you are on the interstate is in line with some point on the other car. You can, for example, say, I look at my mirror and the mirror in the other car, and I want them to always be in the same spot. So you're moving your car just to stay in line. Now imagine on the other side, in the 3rd lane, there's somebody who's doing the same thing, keeping the same position. And then somebody behind you is always keeping the distance to the cars in the left and the right lane and the one in front. So now you basically have that diamond. But if you ever try this, you will see it's not so easy, because the guy in the lead is not just steady like cruise control and never moving.
Right.
So we have that in our mind, right? Like we are positioned, the others are our position. Now imagine I take the road away. And this is all in 3 dimensions.
Nice.
So what determines ultimately where everybody is?
GPS, I hope.
No.
Satellite.
Everybody is lining up to the one in the front.
Oh, I see what you're going at. Okay.
Right? You are lining up. If the guy in the front, you're lining your mirror with their mirror, the one on the right side, same thing, and the one behind you, same thing, right? Everybody is lining up to where the person in the front is, or the car in the front is. And if the car in the front is going a little faster, you have to go a little faster. If the front is slowing down, you have to slow down. If you go in 3-dimensional and the one is going up or a little down, you have to go up and down. For the people on the ground, to make that look like it's all one thing, everybody has to be in perfect position at all times. Now, to do this, I can tell you from personal experience, it takes years and years and years to really make it look like it's not moving while everything is moving. It's super like fine little, I mean, think about it. If you ever, and I encourage anybody, make it safe. I'm not trying to ask you to do crazy stuff, but just try this. You don't even need to imagine the other cars. Take one car when you're driving on a interstate and try to stay in the same position with that car for more than like a few minutes. And you will get exhausted paying attention, looking at it while also keeping your own thing safe, right? You still have to look at where you're going. Don't want to run into somebody in front of you, but then also staying in the perfect position that you picked for just a little while. It's hard work, not even talking about 3 dimensions. So now that you know how that diamond formation works, what do you think makes that hard work a little easier?
If the leader knows what they're going.
Yes. Great. Number 1. What else?
I would say is discipline. Well, training, really knowing that leader first. It's like you're getting to
Yeah.
know them.
You need to know that you can depend on that person and not doing
Yes.
crazy stuff.
Right. That's true.
Absolutely.
And then it's obviously trust comes with
Trust.
all of
Yeah.
that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
what does
I'm
the
sorry.
leader have to do? What does the leader have to do is not only flying safe and basically looking ahead for everybody that is in formation, but the leader also have to think, what can I reasonably do that will not screw up the rest of the formation, the other people that are depending on me?
Right.
So sudden up, sudden down, sudden acceleration, sudden deceleration, not good. So what is the real solution is you want to be as stable as you possibly can. If you're not moving much, it makes it so much easier for everybody else to align. Right? Now, if the people that are in your formation don't know how to fly very well, it's still going to suck. That's what I said earlier about how to pick good people. They have to have the skills for which you pick them. And somebody might be great looking out the window to the right at the leader, and you put him on the other side and it doesn't work anymore. Right. That's basically to say somebody is great at property management, but they suck at renovations. Right? So this idea of the diamond formation leadership, or this idea is basically to say, what is my role as King Weaver? That's your role as the leader of that formation. Be stable, be dependable, be trustworthy, but also you have every right when you come back on the ground and you review, and there's somebody who took pictures or video of the formation when you were flying and you see one or two constantly being out of shape, you're going to give them some homework, and maybe 1 second chance to do it better next time, but not forever.
Right.
Because you don't want to embarrass yourself with the audience on the ground who wants to see a perfect diamond.
Right.
Right. And by the way, most of the time, to make this analogy a little bit more cheeky, is the audience is your wife or your spouse. Right. If you promise that you're going to bring in $220 per house every month, and it rarely ever happens, your audience is not going to be happy. I can tell you that.
So my, I guess you'd say rough experience with investments when it comes to real estate is that everybody gets paid first before you do. And that's one of the things that I've learned the hard way. But also it's that if you don't have the right people in place before you even do the investment, time is also of the essence as well, because you could be sitting on a property, found a great deal, but if you don't have the contractor to come in immediately or within that first month to try to start working on it now, it's almost like you're wasting money. You're just sitting there throwing money away because you can't really do anything unless you're going to, like you said, be the handyman to go fix the toilets, fix the walls, and do the renovations yourself, and have the time to do that before you even get somebody in there. So everybody's getting paid before you do, if I'm not mistaken on that.
That is a mindset, and it's understandable, but that's a mindset that doesn't put you in the position of king. And when you ask yourself, how do I switch this? How do I put myself in the position of king?
Yeah.
My answer would be just look at the other end of the month. The reality is, if you say everybody gets paid first and then I get paid, that means you get what's left over of the rent payment. Right?
Yep.
If you switch your mindset to say, sometime in the first 6 days of the month, somebody is giving me the money for the privilege of being allowed to live in my house, then you get paid first. And then out of that money, the mortgage company gets paid, and the property manager gets paid, and whoever else gets paid. First, you providing at day one of the month somebody with the privilege to live in your house. They give you the money, typically in the first 5 to 8 days of the month, and everything else follows. And theoretically, I mean, I know this doesn't really exist anymore in this day and age, But it used to be, if you ask people who were in real estate investing 40, 50 years ago, they will tell you that they collected the money. Oftentimes it came in cash or check. They went to the bank, cashed it in, and then they went around because everything was local. But it's not like today where everything, and you never really see your insurance people and stuff. They literally went and brought the money that they had collected to the people that were providing the services to them, to property management, to the bank, to the insurance people, and so forth and so forth. Nowadays, it's all electronic, but the process is, am I looking at everybody gets paid and then I keep the rest? Or am I looking at, I'm providing shelter for $1,500 per month, and that's what I get for providing the shelter. And then, since I don't want to do all the work, I am paying out of that money for the services, basically the salaries for what the people did.
Okay.
It's literally as simple as that, to say, am I looking at the end of the month from last month, or am I looking at what starts the whole thing? I own a property, I make it available, I collect up front.
Mm-hmm.
You get paid first, then they can live off it for a month.
Yeah. So how did you get through some of these like early on rejections? Like, what was your mindset around your early rejections, like the lessons that you learned from those?
I was too weak. Is one thing that I realized, and I'm very grateful to basically be part of some groups, that I joined with people that had more experience. And the first thing they told me is, you need a mentor. And that's basically my mantra these days. When people say, okay, how do you help people investing in real estate? I say, yes, for seriously experienced investors who can show me that they have all the experience, I help them with making my network available to them. But 90+% of people don't have that. Right. And for them, the first step is to join the mentoring program. And that is basically like somebody taking you under your wings and say, hey, I have a portfolio of 10 properties. I have $3 million in asset value. I have this huge network of connections. Sure, can you build all of that on your own? But it's going to take you years. It took me basically 15 years to build it. Why would you do this on your own, go through the pain and the rejections? And on top of that, sometimes it's not even the rejections, just you make a decision and it's the wrong one, and then you feel the pain. Right. You didn't get rejected. They did what you asked them to do. It was just the wrong thing. Right. So like one example is, you want to be the manager of the renovation and you're putting all the nice stuff in that you would want to have for your own house. So now you invest into the property in relation to what the market is able to pay you in rent. Now you were expecting $200-300 in positive cash flow, and in reality you have $200-300 in negative cash flow. Right. And the audience, you know who that is gonna, say, what the hell, Mr. Weaver, King Weaver, what did you do? Right. If you were enrolled in a mentoring program, you say, hey, I want to do this, this, and this. I would say to you, hey, King Weaver, ask yourself, are you doing this for yourself because you like it? Do you need granite countertops and fancy faucets and stuff? Or do you want to provide a good product, a good quality product that functions? Right? You might love it when you get up in the morning out of bed and you like to go bare feet and you want to have a nice fluffy carpet. Right. Totally understandable, and in your own house, go for it. In a rental property, you have to replace these carpets every 2 or 3 years. So what do? We put laminate floors. Yes, they're kind of cold when you get barefoot out of bed, but they function properly so that you only do it every 20 years. Right. So that kind of stuff is what a mentor can help you when you say, okay, if you really want to get into renovation. One thing, if anybody, by the way, has ever watched HGTV, any of these renovation shows, if you're honest and turn off your emotional brain and just look at your logical brain, you see that they basically show you find a property, you renovate it for way more than you originally estimated, and then you're the lucky ass every single episode that finds somebody who's paying that increased price. Not the one you originally wanted, but the one you need to make because you over-renovated it. Yeah. Right, that's what HGTV does, and I like to watch it. I like what they're doing, but the message is wrong. So here comes the solution. We're back to turnkey investing.
Yep.
Turnkey investor finds the ugly duckling in a good neighborhood, sends their renovation team, and they renovate it. They monitor what goes into the renovation. Why? Because the sales team of that same company ultimately has to put a price on it, that when you and I, King Weaver and King Axel, go and say, we want to see if we can buy this property, our employee, Bank ABC, hey, we want to buy this thing. They say, cool, we send one of our employees called appraiser to this thing. Oh, what do they want for it? What are they asking? Oh, they're asking 185. Appraiser goes in and says 170 is all I can get. What do you and I say? Hey, Mr. Seller of the turnkey company, your thing is $15,000 too much, and I have it in writing. Mr. Appraiser said so. Right. So if you give it to 170, we have a deal. If you don't, we don't. Right? That's
yeah, the hand raises.
Yeah, I showed the hand. Sorry. Right. So that's how that goes. So you might make emotional decisions on how to renovate the property. The turnkey provider renovation team goes strictly by a list of what makes this property functional for a tenant and stays within a price so that when they want to sell it, it appraises. That's part of the reason why I like to work with turnkey providers, because you never buy a property that is over-renovated.
That's smart.
Right? Okay. So now you have that, and then obviously the other thing is what's the quality of the renovation? Well, it has to be good enough so that the property management part of the turnkey provider is not constantly complaining about the renovation team. Why? Because when I'm your mentor, King Weaver Real Estate is going to buy that property from the turnkey provider, I will teach you to insist that you get a 1-year warranty on everything they touch during the renovation. They might initially bark against it and say, well, we normally don't do this. My first thing, you and I on the call with these guys, is hold it. You are not trusting your renovation team to do good enough work so that our tenant can live in the property you're just selling to us at least for 1 year without repairs? Really?
Wow.
That's what you're saying? Oh, no, I never said that. I know that's not, we do really good. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, if you do such good work, then you give us a 1-year warranty. And if anything breaks and the tenant says, hey, the faucet is dripping or this and so forth, you go in and fix it. And I always say that if that is not your common thing, you should make it the common thing, because one thing it's going to do is your renovation team will be chewed out so much every week that they will do a better job. Right. If they really need it. If they're good, you never need to chew them out. You never need to use the warranty. Nothing lost. But you and I, as the investors, know when does stuff break when it's just been freshly installed.
Well, usually, if it's freshly installed, it depends. I would say it depends, because sometimes it could be immediately as soon as somebody go to use it. But if it's properly installed, it's usually about 5 years.
Right, exactly. But if it's not properly installed, it breaks in the first month or so.
Yeah. Yep.
Or pretty much immediately the first time you use it. And I mean, I've seen this, like sometimes it's 3 months in, because there's like a shower and a bathtub and other stuff, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And like for whatever circumstance, they use the bathtub the first time 3 months in. And it doesn't work properly, or it doesn't get warm, or it doesn't, whatever, drain properly. Well, that's why you want a year. Because most of the things in a house you will use within the first year.
That's true.
Right. But that's also something, if you ask yourself, what's the difference for buying a property from a flipper versus buying a property from a turnkey provider? When you buy a property from somebody who flips properties or does the Burr method or whatever, they don't do property management. So you can look at the property, you can have inspectors go through the property, all good. The inspectors, they can turn on the faucet and stuff. They're not going to take a bath or anything like that, right? So what happens is, now you finished, you bought the property, you find property management because it's 1,500 miles away from where you live, and property management starts. Tenants go in the first 3 months, they find all kinds of stuff that doesn't really work quite right. Flipper is gone. You said you bought it as seen. Property management says this stuff needs to be fixed. Well, you have a basically freshly renovated house where you're just starting to get rent, and most of your rent is going into these repairs that should have been taken care of if the flipper would have done a good job. That's one of the big differences when people tell me, yeah, but when I buy it from a flipper, I get it a bit cheaper than from turnkey. Yes, maybe true at the beginning, but you might pay it back. I'm not saying this is true for everyone, but you might pay it back in repairs because you can never get back to that flipper after the deal is done. But when you're buying from a turnkey provider, that's the same company that you bought it from that's also managing it for you.
Yeah, the things that we tend not to, the things that we tend to look over, and that's very important to remind people of, especially the listener that's listening right now about it.
Let me ask you one thing. How many kings do you think there are that overlook the stuff that's important to them?
That's important to them?
None, right? So if you really see your role as King Weaver Real Estate LLC and you are the king, or for that matter, queen, if you have female audience members, that's the thing that you're building as the creator of your own future, so that at some point you don't have to work anymore. I have a hard time thinking of a whole lot of other things, maybe your kids and your spouse, but then after that, that's probably the most important thing, or should be.
Yeah. Because you mentioned the futures. So let's go on and go to the third segment of the show, which is the futures. So what areas are you focusing on for your self-improvement?
You mean in investing or in general?
Oh, in general.
Well, one thing that I'm doing for my own self-improvement is getting better and better, I hope at least, of understanding the big picture. Right? Like, it's one thing when the media is telling us we just had Liberation Day on April 2nd. I think it's a very different thing to know what does that mean in the big picture. Right? Because one of the things, and I like to keep using the same terms, what is one of the big roles that I have discovered for being a king or a queen is you kind of have to have a pretty good idea what could happen in the future. The people working for you are basically assuming that you're not just living in the here and now, but that you have a plan for where we're going to go. And as soon as you make any kind of plan, any kind of vision for where you want to go, you're being impacted by all the other stuff. Right? If we, in 2 years, if you anticipate we have 10 or 15% inflation, you will do different things than if you say inflation will stay at 2%. If you think in 2 or 3 years interest rates will be 3% or will be 12%, you will do different things, right? And so forth. So what I do for myself is constantly learning more and more about the bigger and bigger picture, because I believe by now, it took me like a long, many decades, but I believe by now, the more you understand the big picture, the more you can anticipate and position yourself properly.
I like that. Okay. All right. So you have anything left that you want to say before we dive into the final 4 questions?
I would basically like to ask your audience to, if you haven't already, really ask yourself how much better your future is most likely going to be if you have somebody who is helping you along, who's already done it.
I like that. Man, you have a lot of gems today.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. So you ready for final 4?
Yeah.
All righty. Number 1, what does wealth mean to you?
Wealth means to me to have enough passive money coming in so I can do with my time whatever I want to.
Okay. Number 2, what was your worst money mistake?
Investing in the stocks during the .com time, like doc.com and fryingpan.com and stuff like that.
I remember those days. Number 3, is there a book that inspired your journey or changed your perspective?
Oh, there's many. One that I like to suggest for people who are kind of contemplating becoming an investor or becoming King Weaver Real Estate LLC's king is The Wealthy Gardener by John Soforic.
I heard such great things. I have yet to read that one. I'll definitely need to read that.
But the nice thing about that one, just so the audience knows, it's one thing to read a book, but if the author, and John has done that in this case, kind of made additional little things, little snippets that are easy to remember, and they're kind of woven through the whole book, kind of like a little bit like lessons learned or like affirmations that you want to be aware of or something like that. And so if you go on the wealthygardener.com, I think it is, on the website, it literally has all of those listed, and it even tells you in which chapter of the book they are. My recommendation is to read the book first, and then if you want to say, hey, I remember this one thing that really resonated, you can go on the website and find it there. But that's a nice little add-on that most books don't have.
Mm. Okay, well, thank you for that. Number 4, what is your favorite dish to make?
Favorite dish to make? I would say chicken wings.
Interesting. What do you put on your wings?
We put, I'm without frying, right? We're doing them on the barbecue, So okay. So we put little salt, little pepper, little paprika, and little curry.
Ooh, okay, that sounds really nice right now. Thinking about it.
Actually, many years ago, we had like in the neighborhood where we moved into, like a new development, everybody was new, and they had a barbecue contest, and I got a little third place trophy for the best. I got the best chicken wings, but the guys who won were basically making the better steaks.
Well, congrats on that. I mean, local celebrity over here. Awesome.
Yeah, very local.
The last question of the show, which is, where can people find out more about you?
Well, we mentioned it a bunch of times. If you go on ideawealthgrower.com, there's a button to book a complimentary call and talk and see if I can help. But in general, if you just put Idea Wealth Grower into Google, or you can put it into AI and it gives you all the links. We're pretty much everywhere as far as finding us. And then from there, you can get in touch.
Yep. And if you can say, I can never get your last name. That's why I haven't said it yet. Can you just say your last? Like,
yeah, Axel Meierhoefer, or Dr. Axel Meierhoefer, if you want to be elaborate.
Okay. Thanks. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been great information, especially insight into the real estate realm from just the mindset and also understanding the numbers behind it, but also understanding the why and really utilizing the mentorship process, because it's a lot of failures out here, failing in real estate. And that's why I have a feeling that the stock market's, not the stock market, but the real estate market is going to be trashy come soon, very soon.
Yeah, I have to disagree. I think it's a matter of how you're doing it. But it was a great pleasure to talk to King Weaver today.
Okay, thanks. We'll definitely have to probably come back and see how things go within
absolutely.
a year or two.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Y'all be safe. We out. Peace.